So yes, I was asked to come and talk about, do cows in Southland get heat stress? And I'll just make a nod to our partners that we've done quite a lot of work in this space as part of the NZ BIDA project, New Zealand and the Bioeconomy in the Digital Age, with partners from Terra, Ag Research and Dairy NZ. And what has spun this talk, it's now early days, is that we did quite a significant heat stress trial in the summer just gone. So I'm going to talk about some of the preliminary results and bring that into this discussion. So in terms of the content, just what I'm going to cover in the next 30 minutes is what is heat stress, really what to look for in your cows, and how they're responding to the conditions. Why we're interested in this as a topic, potentially around the welfare concerns that we're seeing, productivity risks, milk production. That question, does heat stress occur in Southland? And really referring to our most recent 2023 study that we've done. What can I do? So that's how do I manage my cows in terms of heat stress risk, and also what don't we know, the questions that we've had that are sitting up there from this work that we're doing. So what is heat stress and how do cows respond? This is a really good starting framework because often it's about identifying, do my cows actually get heat stress and what do I need to look for? So cows, they're trying to maintain their body temperature. They're more sensitive to humans, to heat stress than we are, and a lot of part of that is that they have quite a fermentation vat, and that's generating a lot of heat. So they're trying to maintain their body temperature, and that's that balance between gaining heat and releasing body heat. So if we see, hopefully you can see it all, okay, normal body temperature of the cow is around that 38 to 39.3 degrees, and you can see that straight line there. So that represents the normal. So when the cows get hot, that's when we see body temperatures start to rise, and we start to see impacts on milk production, leading up to fertility, and in some cases death, although this is not an issue for New Zealand, but it is in other countries where it gets really hot. So what we start to see in those early stages is behavioural changes in cows. They want to avoid gaining heat, and they will start to do things like seeking out shade. And that happens quite early on in the piece. So typically when we start to see temperature go above 20 degrees, although this is very much dependent on the site, your location, such as humidity and solar sun, we start to see cows make behavioural changes quite early on. What then happens early on in the piece, as they move out of that body temperature being normal, is that they will start to sweat. So this is their way of releasing that excess body heat, but you can see from the graph here that it starts to level off quite quickly. So they are limited, cows are limited in their ability for their sweating to release that heat load. Then they also start to try and get rid of that excess heat by breathing faster. So normal breathing for a cow is around that less than 40 breaths per minute, and that helps to evaporate the heat from the respiratory tract. And so that is early on in the piece. As their body temperature increases, their breathing rate increases. So when we start to see greater than 60 to 70 breaths per minute, that is an indication that those cows need something to help them mitigate their heat stress. As they start to breathe faster, we start to see panting, so that's that 100 or so more breaths per minute. And this is when the body temperature is starting to increase, and this is the sign that the cows are having difficulty in terms of coping with heat stress. So how to identify panting, and this photo shows it quite nicely. You'll see a cow with her mouth open, her tongue may be out, and she may also be drooling. So Those are some key things to look for if you're going to go and look at your herd, just understand if they're starting to get under heat stress. So because you've got cows panting, they're breathing heavily, they're sweating, they're needing to replenish that water that they're losing through that evaporation. So we'll start seeing them drink more with water, which you can see happening here. And so you might see cows all around the water trough, all trying to get something to drink. And it's just been aware that on those really hot days, lactating cows, they're drinking over 100 litres per cow per day. So it's understanding your farm system and the ability to deliver that water that those cows need on those hot days. And another way that these cows are coping is that they eat less because they are avoiding trying to gain any more heat. As I mentioned, they're generating heat from their fermentation in their rumen, and so they will start to decrease how much they're eating, and this has effects on your milk production. And also, the cows have a shift in how they're petitioning their energy and what it's being used for. So it's not only the eating less that's affecting the milk production, but how they're petitioning their energy. So I guess a key part of all of this is that first early sign that we know is that breathing rate is one of your first indicators that go up before any problems start. So keep this in the back of your mind when I talk more about the importance of breathing rate. It happens early on and it is straightforward to measure, and I'll show that shortly, and it's a really good indicator of animals starting to come under a thermal challenge. So why are we interested in heat stress? There's two main areas. One is around that potential welfare risk for the animal, and the other is around productivity concerns. So as well as a changing climate, what we are having with our hotter days, humid days, is that we've done intentional changes to our farm systems over the years, which has led to an increased risk of heat stress in our cows. So, for example, what we're doing is that we've got cows with increased production. So they're eating more, they're generating more heat, and they need to get rid of that heat. We have more black or crossbred cows, and they're really good at absorbing solar radiation. We see fewer trees just with land development in terms of getting irrigation and cropping. We're fencing off our waterways, water quality. This is leading to reduced access to damp and shaded areas. And we're having animals that are having to walk long distances to the milking shed. Although this is quite a nice photo, we're changing our practices, but cows are quite resourceful. No stream, no problem. They'll find a way to try and cool themselves down. So some earlier work that has been done was to get some farmer insights around how they viewed heat stress. And for farmers, the number one concern was around that cow comfort. And this is in those areas where farmers understood that their climate was an issue to generate heat stress. Milk production losses came after the fact, and a big worry for those farmers in climates that heat stress was a problem was being able to provide sufficient water or mitigation strategies on those hot days for the number of cows that they had on their farm. We heard from farmers that they'd like to see dashboards or apps or texts that would tell them when there was going to be more of a risk of heat stress occurring. They wanted to also then have an understanding of what mitigations were going to be most effective at that time. They wanted to have a cost-benefit tool for planning and being able to get some strategies in place. And they also wanted to have access to cows, to data from cows in their region. So, because what we find is that the climate is very changeable depending on what location you're at. And so some of those farmer insights have been the basis of the New Zealand research that has been going on, particularly around heat stress indexes, heat stress impacts and mitigations. And so there are different ways that we can measure the heat load of an animal. So I talked about these animal-based measures. Those are the ones of respiration rate, panting, drooling, to measure from an animal. It does involve going out and looking at the animal, so it can be quite labour intensive to do that. Air temperature is an easy one. It's associated with increasing temperature, associated with increasing heat stress risk. But the issue with that is we're seeing it's a combination of factors, of different weather conditions that have this impact on our cows. So the temperature humidity index, and I don't know if many people have heard of that before, that is the well-known research, international tool for predicting heat stress in animals, and that combines air temperature and humidity. And this actually started out many, many years ago as a human comfort index, and it has been adapted over time to cows. Where in New Zealand, researchers are taking it further because we are quite different in how we manage our cows here compared to overseas, where animals are housed in barns. So we've got what we call the heat load index that we've been working on, and that incorporates not only air temperature and humidity, but also solar radiation, because we have our cows outdoors, and wind speed. So part of the work that we have been doing under the NZ BIDA program has involved looking at this grazing heat load index and getting it as accurate as we possibly can across a whole of different regions and conditions in New Zealand. And that was the basis of a heat stress study that we did in the summer just gone. So that study looked at updating this grazing heat load index equation, and it looked at what the implications of this were for farmer information around thresholds and indexes. And we also looked at exploring the potential of animal sensors for indicators of heat stress. So the heat stress study that we've done, and I know this is quite hard to see, but in a nutshell, we had 8 farms across New Zealand, a mixture of research and commercial farms. So Northland, Waikato, Canterbury and Southland. Farm 6 of interest, Farm 6 was Ashley Dean, Farm 7 was Lincoln University Research Farm, and Farm 8 was Southland Dairy Hub. We did a lot of observations of respiration rate. There's a bit here in the team, over 22,000 observations of manual respiration rate, as well as using sensor technology on individual cows, so smack tech, Affy collar, Affy milk, and milk data. So this is all hot off the press. I'm giving you a glimpse of where we're at, and we're working on the data. What we essentially did is, I said, we looked at measuring respiration rate, and this is on our DNZ website, how to measure it. Basically, you go and you stand, you watch the cows, and you watch their ribs going in and out. You set a timer for 10 seconds, and you count the full number of breaths. Anything, if you count less than 7 breaths in that 10 seconds, it's okay. If you're counting more than 10 breaths, you've got an issue on your hands, and these cows are needing some form of heat stress mitigation, what we call they're needing cooling opportunities. So we also had the sensor technology, and this was across various farms. We had the smack tech boluses, so that's for measuring inner body temperature, drinking behaviour, rumination and activity, so that's at the individual cow level. And we also had the Affy collars, which have panting rate as well. So we were really interested in understanding, could we use sensor technology at the individual animal level to help us have better indicators of heat stress, other than, say, having to go out and look at cows and measure respiration rate. So what we found a range of conditions, and this might be quite hard to see, but along the bottom here we have Farm 0 to Farm 8. Farm 0 is our reference farm. We've done a lot of work in the Waikato, so that's our historical Waikato database. And then we have the other farms that you saw on that table. So the 6, 7 and 8 are our South Island farms. And on the top Your left there is temperature, and you can see that we've got quite a range of temperature. We actually had 2 cyclones in the North Island for the summer, so we didn't hit the temperature highs that we typically normally do, but we got great data for the South Island. I mean, at Southern Hub, you can see we've got a range from 15 degrees all the way up to 35 degrees in terms of temperature. Each one of these farms had their own weather station, and that's key to the data that we're capturing. You can see we've got humidity there, also a great range, wind speed, and then the solar radiation. And if we just focus on the South Island data and what we've got, so 7, 6, 8 being Southern Hub, you can see along the bottom here we've got temperature bins. So this is the air temperature grouped, and then along the top left there is the respiration rate. So when I talk about anything in that 60 to 70 breaths per minute, that's where we need to start providing those cooling opportunities for cows. And you can see around that 22-degree bin that we're seeing potentially up to half the herd, especially with farm 7 and farm 8 over that threshold range. We also see that, and it's quite hard, sorry, at the Southern Dairy Hub, we were getting by that 26-degree day breaths over that 100 breaths per minute, so exhibiting those signs of heat stress. So it's quite a nice data set to show that as we are going up in temperature, we are seeing an increase in cows breathing. You can see for farm 6, it's gone a bit flatlined, although the pattern is still there. And we're just digging into the data of that farm 6 because it might be that this farm had done something on that day in terms of mitigation. They might have provided shade, they might have provided sprinklers on the yard. So that's something that we need to delve into with some of this data. I should have said though, this data set, the farms that were all part of it, the whole idea was that mitigation strategies for heat stress were going to be used. So that was, the point was to see what the weather did on respiration rate. And this is a video, so you can see, and I'll have to play it a couple of times. This is taken by Carissa, who took this, at the Southern Dairy Hub. And it's just a very nice example of how you've got to be really walking amongst your herd to see it. It happens quite fast, but if I play that...
If you just go back a little forward.
You can see mouth open, that cow's panting heavily. So it's a glimpse. You can imagine how hard it is and how fast she is breathing. To be collecting over 22,000 observations of that respiration rate is, quite a challenge. So just, looking, this is the type of things that you're looking for to understand that on a hot day, are my cows needing some cooling? And this is just a snapshot of where we're at with the sensors. This is air temperature, so ambient temperature and rumen temperatures. And again, it's a bit hard to see, but what we're seeing is that as the air temperature is going up, we're seeing an associated effect with rumen temperature. It's just important to note though that these sensor technologies are not designed to be predicting heat stress. What we're trying to do is understand if we can find all sorts of different animal factors that is going to be associated with a heat stress effect. So because we know that when cows eat, you're going to be generating heat in that rumen. So it's understanding where are we finding those relationships, and we're seeing some patterns here which we will be looking further into. So what can I do? If I know that heat stress is going to be an issue, what can I do about it? And a lot of the work that we're trying to do is to help farmers have a better ability to forecast and predict if heat stress is going to be an issue. So if I know that tomorrow at 2 o'clock my cows are at high heat stress risk, how can I manage them to reduce that heat load and it becoming an issue and affecting my milk production? So that's what we're trying to work on to get more accuracy, say, in those types of predictions with the grazing heat load index. We know that farmers are already employing a lot of strategies to mitigate heat stress, and some of them are, providing that shade, trees, covered areas. So if you're able to know when a heat stress event is going to occur, it might be that you're going to manage your animals differently. You might have them then going to the paddocks that have the most amount of shade so that you can have them there at the hottest time of the day. It's about providing plenty of cool, clean drinking water. And by that, having plenty of troughs. Do you need troughs in your races? Do they have sufficient flow to be able to meet those needs of, as I said, over 100 litres per day per cow who's lactating cow? Sprinklers, fans, cooling cows down when they're packed on the yard. We're looking at options around once a day milking, 3 and 2. That's what happened at the Southern Dairy Hub last summer. They changed their milking frequency. And a lot of that is the association of it, so you then have animals that aren't walking those distances anymore to generate heat, or they are just not going to eat as much or be packed on that yard. So reducing that activity and that walking distance. Again, if you know that it's going to be a really hot day tomorrow, you're going to have a heat stress event in your cows, it might be that you have them closer at the shed, to the shed. So that paddock selection also goes into that. What we don't know from this work is quite a lot. We know that the individual animals, especially from the sensor data, cope with heat stress differently. I mean, we as humans cope with heat stress differently. So we're looking to understand, okay, well, if some animals cope differently than the others, can we then manage those cows differently? And with this individual cow sensor technology that is becoming more and more available, that is becoming more of a feasible option going forward, and then understanding how she's interacting with the environment. So it might be that your farm here is quite different to the one down the road who might be on a ridge versus someone who's down in a gully, because we're looking at solar radiation, wind speed, humidity, and all factors that we need to consider. So really understanding that animal response. We don't know enough about the milk production impacts. The data is from the 1990s and it's been based on heifers. So what are the actual impacts that we're having on cows through heat stress? What are those breed effects? There is data out there around different breeds having different thresholds of heat stress, but then what is the effect going forward and how our farm systems are changing and our climate is changing? So what are our impacts on those thresholds? We're working to update industry information and guides around the heat stress effects. We're also trying to be able to better forecast which regions are going to be impacted in the future. So we've got a Deep South program going on in terms of predicting that climate effect, and really trying to understand how technology can play a role. So moving away from, say, respiration rate as an indicator of heat stress, is there something else out there that will give us a better understanding of when that heat load is going to happen on those cows? So conclusions, changes to the climate and the way we farm, increasing heat stress risks in our cows. To be aware that from around that 20 degrees is when we start to need to think about providing cooling opportunities for our cows. But that is dependent on your farm and where you are located. So your humidity, how much sun, how much cloud cover you have. It's all related to that, and that's the whole point of the grazing heat load index. Yes, cows are at risk in Southland for heat stress, as we're seeing from our 2023 study. And it's really leading to questions, okay, well, how can we provide cooling in a cost-effective and practical way in our New Zealand pasture-based system? So, take homes, one, identify when your cows might be able to identify when your cows might be heat stressed. Go walk around them, look at their respiration rate, and then have strategies on hand to be able to deal with it. And I'll just finish on a long list of acknowledgements. I'm just the one person who's the standing mouthpiece, but yes, a lot of people have pulled this information together, so acknowledging the list here.
Question. With the, you said that we don't know the effects on milk production yet. With Fonterra's Insights report...
Oh, yes, we do know the effects on milk production, but we don't know how it is changing with our cows that have been coming, you know, from a cow from the 1990s is quite different to now, and so yes, understand, and our climate is changing as well, so I think it's around that 10 grams for milk solids impact, but how is it changing going forward?
And is that what's in Fonterra's Insights?
Yeah, so the Fonterra Insights report is based on the grazing heat load index, and so we are working with Fonterra to update that grazing heat load index based on the 8 farms that we've done this study on, because this is the first lot of data that actually has South Island farms in that index, so it's just really trying to improve the accuracy of that, which then feeds into the Insights Impacts report in terms of assessing what that risk is for farms. Yeah.
And Kirsty, I guess just following up on that, my understanding with the heat load index, like humidity is a really important part of it. And if we think about the Waikato situation compared with Southland, so we may get hot during the day, but tend to get cooler conditions at night, so the cows actually have this ability to, I guess, dissipate some of that heat, whereas the Waikato stays hot right through. Is that likely to impact?
Yeah, and that's where we're trying to, that grazing heat load index is a snapshot on the point in time of the day based on maximum temperature, so we're trying to understand that heat load, that cumulative heat load on the animal, where if she has ability to cool down overnight, how it does her, say, starting point the next day, affect her heat stress following. So yeah, that's another part that we're looking to.
Any questions? Luke?
Dawn, I know it's...
Not me.
No, I know you do have there are a couple of sprinklers set up on the yard. And Kirsty said that you try not to use them to have a good data set, but do you have any data on if they were used and does that help?
We do have data on that. So Karen Schutz from AgResearch has done quite a lot of work on looking at heat stress mitigations and how that affects their threshold. Yeah. So sprinklers on the yard and then shade, and there's a few others. So she has published work on those impacts, and it does. She's also been able to rank which is most effective as well on the cow for reducing that heat load.
Because I'm sitting here saying, okay, yes, last summer was really hot, which probably quite a few days, but what do I do? Like, it's hard for me to figure out what you actually do, and especially, we try to set up systems where we're not always there. Yep. So it's slightly more team members down south as a general rule. So how do you make it easy? What's in place? Okay, if it's putting in sprinklers, that's probably pretty easy to do. If it's changing some of the milking time or paddock destinations on the fly, that might be more difficult for some. So for me, thinking, okay, how do I build a system that is...
Yeah. So just a bit more to that, a couple of days we seen at home last year, sort of 29, 30 degrees, and cows quite comfortable when they got in the morning, but then sort of 11 to 12, 1 o'clock, more shade, into shade. So late afternoon isn't too bad. It's come off, but sort of held a lot of pressure on the morning and the day. So to understand what we can do at the yard and stuff, but actually there's some physical stuff outside there.
And I guess one of the things, so when Louise came down from the Waikato and had lots of experience with heat stress, and observed, like in her first season at the hub, observed some of the cows during the summertime, that was when she had rigged up the sprinklers on the yard, and it's not a sophisticated system, but it works pretty effectively. And what we did at the request of the research team, for the 2 weeks that the measurements were being taken at the hub, we didn't use the sprinklers on the yards for that herd. We did for the other herds, for that herd we didn't get the true heat cover.
And so that crazy heat load index that I'm talking about, what ideally we want to be able to do to farmers is say, look, tomorrow is going to be a significant heat stress risk day for your cows. So it might be that you're going to turn on the sprinklers that day before they come into the yard. Or you're going to go, okay, well, I'm going to put my cows in a closer paddock that has the trees. And you start being more strategic with the options that you have available to help reduce their heat load. Yeah. Because you can't do it every day. You know, it's about being more strategic with what you have available.
Any other questions?
What's the effect with heat, shade versus water? Or in priority, I guess. You know, again, maybe people talk about
It'll
this.
depend on your farm and your environment, because you might have a lot of wind and be exposed, and therefore a different index versus if you've got cloud cover. So it depends on your location, and there is published work, and I'm happy to share that with you around the different strategies and their impact. The shade is, you need quite a bit of shade for cows. It's around that 5 metres square per cow. You know, really one tree in a paddock for your whole mob is not enough, because what they're doing is they're packing in together. So it's dependent on what infrastructure, what trees, what your farm setup is, and that's part of our future questions that we have is what is your farm setup and how can we work to understand how you rank your different strategies, impact on your heat stress.
And with the sprinklers, it's got to be a certain amount of water going on their backs to actually cool them, doesn't
They've got to get wet.
You've got to get really wet.
Like the water was running off the animals.
And it's interesting, the more we look at and we talk about cow comfort is you've got the animal response and herd choice versus what you're able to do from a management perspective. So often it's around, like I said, that 20 degrees that you'll see cows start to take themselves off to find shade versus you managing them in a way. You know, and some cows have that preference that they don't want to be doused under water, they'd rather say find that shade. So it's also that cow comfort and her choice of what she needs for reducing her heat load.
Okay, we will get time-wise.
Yep, bang on.
Bang on. Perfect. Right. Can you do the attention, Kirsty?